Well, earlier this week, parts of our area experienced a 100-year flood. 4029 meteorologist Robert Suhr here with us tonight for this week's Weather Wise. So, Robert, we heard that term, but the question is, what does it actually mean?
Well, do you know what it means?
I figure the time, I guess it's been 100 years since the last.
Well,
flood
it's one of those
magnitude.
very common misconceptions. It's kind of the Mandela effect, if you've ever heard of that statement, where everybody thinks it is, but it's not. And there's a lot to explain with a 100-year flood. So first I want to start off with some video that we got earlier this week. This is in Siloam Springs. This is a typical creek that we saw over the, a lot in the area over the past week. And what you're seeing here is basically what is considered at bank full or slightly above bank full. You can see the edge of the creek here. It's over its banks to the right side of the video here. But you notice that flow, how quickly it's moving. That is called flow rate. And every creek has a flow rate. So when we talk about 100-year floods, first of all, I want to talk about what it is not. A 100-year flood is not a flood that happens, or a severity of a flood that happens once every 100 years. Okay? Same with a 50-year flood. It's not once every 50 years. That is the misconception that most people think. What a 100-year flood is, or any delineated year flood is, it is the probability of a body of water, when expressed in a percentage, that will exceed its flow rate in a given year. And I know that sounds like a lot, but when you expand it, a 100-year flood actually has around a 64% chance of happening one or more times over 100 years, not in 1 year, but over a span of 100 or more years. You could see there one or more 100-year floods are possible. Now, when you break down those numbers, so when we look at a 2-year flood, those happen often. You get about a 50% chance in a given year of having a 2-year flood. But you notice the severity of the floods as it increases, the chance of it happening decrease dramatically. So you get down into the 100-year flood, 1% chance. And a 200-year flood, which is a real statistic, a 0.5% chance of occurring. And a 500-year flood, a 0.2% chance of it happening. If you're wondering about any of these floods, well, I have a perfect example of what a 100-year flood or a 200-year flood looks like. We're going to take you back to 2019. This is the big flood with the Arkansas River. This is what we're talking about, where the Arkansas River is above bank full and its flow is going quite quickly as well. You can see it really overspreading its banks. Every body of water has bank limits to it. You can sometimes see it, you sometimes can't. It depends on how wide, what type of body of water it is. But this particular one, this is an extreme example because it was an extreme event, an extreme historical event here. You can see all those homes underwater as the Arkansas River overflowed its banks. Now, as we come back to our weather graphics, anybody can access these. There are what are called floodplain maps that are available online. They're free. This is an example of a 100-year floodplain map in the River Valley. This is the southern section of Fort Smith, and if you get a 100-year flood, everywhere you see the gray will be underwater because the Arkansas River comes up and spills over its banks. It reaches bank full and spills out and inundates all of these areas until the water begins to recede. And every event is different. Sometimes the water recedes rather quickly. Sometimes it takes a while to do that. So when you hear a 100-year flood, remember, it's not once every 100 years. It's actually the percentage of the chance that it could happen in any given year. Remember, you can have 2 or 3 100-year floods in 1 year. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it is certainly possible. If you've got weather questions, you can always shoot them our way or tune in every week around this time for some more weather knowledge.
All right, Robert, thanks for spelling it out. Education there.